This is punk rock. Let's talk genres. Punk rock doesn't have a single origin story. It didn't begin in one night, in one club, or with one band. Instead, it grew out of years of loud, stripped-down, defiant music made by people who rejected the rules. Even the word punk had existed since the 50s, long before it took on its musical meaning. In the 1950s, it meant a street kid, a hood, a nobody in a leather jacket. By the mid-70s, critics were using punk rock to describe raw garage bands, and Punk magazine helped cement the name. But the sound, the attitude, the blueprint were already in motion. The roots go deeper, from early rock and roll rebellion to 60s garage rock to the proto-punk bands who pushed everything closer to the edge. Now, let's follow that path.
Don't hesitate, I can't wait. Love me.
If you dig deep, the attitude of punk shows up in raw early rock and roll. Little Richard screaming, Bo Diddley pounding out hypnotic rhythms, Link Wray literally punching holes in his amplifier, the danger of Jerry Lee Lewis, and the raw teenage angst of Eddie Cochran, the swagger in leather of Gene Vincent. It's primitive, it's loud, it's rebellious. The seed is there, but the true foundation forms in the 1960s when thousands of kids with cheap guitars created something jagged and feral. Across America and far beyond, garage bands are rewriting the rules. The Sonics in Washington blowing out microphones with pure distortion. The Seeds, the Standells, the 13th Floor Elevators. The Kingsmen, raw, untrained, emotional. Surfing Bird by the Trashmen in 1963 is one of the purest early punk blueprints. Unhinged vocals, frantic energy, and absolutely no respect for musical restraint. The Kinks' 1965 song, You Really Got Me, with its heavy distorted guitar riff, is considered a crucial step toward the sound of punk rock. And in Peru, Los Psychos, whose 1965 single Demolición is practically hardcore punk 2 decades early. It's aggressive, amateur, loud, and full of attitude. The proto-punk era. But the real spark, the one critics all agree changed everything, comes from one city. Detroit creates the modern punk bands. MC5, political, explosive, and furious. Kick Out the Jams doesn't just hint at punk, it predicts it. But then comes the band that rewrites the entire story. The Stooges, Iggy Pop, Dave Alexander, brothers Ron and Scott Ashton. A minimalist hurricane of repetition, nihilism, and danger. Their albums, The Stooges in 1969, Funhouse in 1970, and Raw Power in 1973, at that point Iggy and the Stooges, become the closest thing punk has to sacred texts. The records didn't sell, but the few who heard them started bands. And then in 1971, Detroit also gave us Death, the Hackney Brothers, whose raw, ahead of its time recordings now stand as one of punk's missing links. And on the East Coast, another band is quietly laying the psychological art-driven foundation. While Detroit brings chaos, New York brings cool detachment. The Velvet Underground strip rock and roll down to drones, noise, and poetry. No band would influence punk, post-punk, and indie rock more. Hardly anyone bought the albums, but everyone who did formed a band. Then comes the Modern Lovers with Jonathan Richman. Simple, deadpan, minimalist. Basically pre-Ramones Ramones. And speaking of New York...
Let's go!
Before CBGB becomes a punk mecca, New York Dolls crash into the scene. Glam, sleaze, chaos. A bridge between the Stooges and what's coming. Meanwhile, a tiny club in the Bowery becomes a laboratory. CBGB. Between 1974 and 1976, this room becomes ground zero for American punk. Patti Smith, poetry set on fire. Television's angular, artful precision. Blondie's pop with attitude. Talking Heads are school brilliance. And then Ramones. Speed, simplicity, revolutionary. Ramones' 1976 self-titled debut is one of the most important albums ever made. Short, loud, fast, zero fat. The match that lights the fuse. By the mid-70s, mainstream rock had drifted far from the raw rebellion that made it powerful. Arena rock excess, 12-minute solos, concept albums, progressive epics. The music was huge, expensive, and bloated. Even the best bands felt untouchable. Punk wasn't just a genre, it was a reset button. A swing of the pendulum back toward simplicity, honesty, and volume. Kids picked up cheap guitars and said, if they won't give us our music, we'll make it ourselves. While CBGB evolves, the UK has its own underground brewing. Bars and clubs filled with pub rock. Back to basics, fast, tough, and unpretentious. Dr. Feelgood, Brinsley Schwartz, Eddie and the Hot Rods, and the 101ers featuring a young John Woody Mellor, who would soon become Joe Strummer. This scene strips down rock and roll to something lean and furious. Essentially the template for UK punk's aesthetic. It's raw, it's local, it's DIY before DIY. And then Malcolm McLaren crosses the ocean and brings back gasoline with him.
I belong to the blank generation and I can take it or leave it each time.
While managing New York Dolls in their last days, McLaren absorbs the CBGB energy, especially Richard Hell's torn shirts, spiky hair, and nihilism. He returns to London with a mission. He finds 4 kids and changes history. The fuse ignites. Sex Pistols form, volatile, confrontational, and instantly the most dangerous band in Britain. The Clash find their identity, fusing punk aggression with political fire and becoming the movement's beating heart. The Damned release New Rose, the first UK punk single. Buzzcocks self-released Spiral Scratch, a DIY manifesto. X-Ray Specs bring feminist fire and sax-driven chaos. Wire reinvent minimalism. The Adverts shock with Gary Gilmore's Eyes. The Saints detonate from Australia with I'm Stranded. And the Jam channel mod energy into razor-sharp punk precision, tightening the link between 60s rebellion and 70s urgency. Malcolm McLaren's partner, Vivienne Westwood, was a key figure in translating the raw punk attitude into specific look. Their London shop, first called Let It Rock, then Sex, then Seditionaries, became the epicenter of punk fashion. Torn clothes, safety pins, bondage gear, provocative slogans, which was important to the movement as the music itself.
I don't need anyone, don't need no mom and dad.
Back in New York, the fire keeps burning. CBGB wasn't just poetry and art school experiments. It also had a feral, ugly, brilliant underbelly. Before punk had a uniform, Richard Hell invented one. Safety pins, ripped shirts, short hair, a sneer. He lived it before anyone else wore it. First with Television, then in the Heartbreakers with Johnny Thunders, and finally with Richard Hell and the Voidoids, whose 1977 album Blank Generation is a cornerstone of punk's identity. Detached, literary, and completely anti-rock star. Speaking of Heartbreakers, Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls forms the Heartbreakers, a snarling street-tough NYC band whose mix of glam attitude and gutter-level chaos shaped the sound of both CBGB and the UK punk explosion. Their 1977 album LAMF became a cult classic, sloppy, addictive, and essential. Across town, the Dictators were pioneering another side of punk, loud, funny, and brash. Their 1975 album Go Girl Crazy took teenage frustration, wrestling arena bravado, and garage rock attitude and smashed them together. A proto-punk blueprint disguised as a joke but built like a Molotov cocktail. And then there was Dead Boys, the wildest of them all. Fronted by stiff baiters, they arrived from Cleveland like a street gang and turned CBGB into a war zone. Their 1977 debut, Young, Loud, and Snotty, was pure danger, capturing punk at its most violent and electric. Sonic Reducer became an anthem of nihilism. The New York scene wasn't one style. It was a collision. Art, glam, sleaze, and raw power exploding in the same dirty club. That mix is what made punk punk. But it wasn't just the famous few in the UK. The UK scene exploded in all directions. The Vibrators, among the first UK punk bands with pure mania in 1977. The Lurkers, the UK Ramones, melodic, punchy, essential. The Boys, one of punk's earliest power pop leaning groups, fast and melodic. The Stranglers, older, darker, heavier, maybe more pop rock, technically not punks, but swept into the movement. Generation X inject a bright, melodic, glam-leaning edge into the scene. Billy Idol already starred in the making. Sham 69, working class anthems, street level energy, youth crew sing-alongs. The Ruts fuse punk with reggae-driven rhythms and politically charged lyrics, delivering one of the most powerful singles of the era with Babylon's Burning. Stiff Little Fingers, Northern Ireland's Fury, turning political tension into punk power. The Slits, defiant, wild, feminist, ripping the genre open in ways nobody else did. The Undertones from Northern Ireland bring suburban storytelling and classic pop craft. Teenage Kicks becomes one of punk's most timeless songs, championed by John Peel himself. And Subway Sect, led by Vic Godard, bring an art school minimalist, almost ghostly take on punk, influential far beyond their visibility. And so many more, I don't even know if I could mention all of them. But all of them, big names, cult heroes, underground gems, shaped what punk was in real time. Even the word punk has no real clean origin story. As we established before, in the 1950s, punks were greaser troublemakers, young ruffians in leather jackets and switchblades. By the late 60s, underground writers in magazines like Cream, and later Punk in 1975, created by Lex McNeil, John Holmstrom, and Get Done, began using it to describe raw, primitive, anti-establishment rock. For a moment, critics tried to lump everything under New Wave, but quickly it became clear. New Wave kept the polish, Punk kept the danger. Across the country, scenes are growing. Cleveland, Boston, San Francisco, but Los Angeles becomes the next chapter. And in 1979, Germs released GI, produced by Joan Jett, a chaotic foundational document for American punk's evolution. By 1980, punk is mutating fast. LA, DC, and UK are about to create hardcore. But that's the next chapter. Punk didn't just break the rules. It erased them. It changed fashion, culture, politics, identity, and the very idea of what music could be.
Give me your hand, give me your mind, give me